Okay, so hi, my name is Edwin Chan, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm going to be talking about property transfer tax today. So the property transfer tax is a tax that is assessed against a buyer or acquirer of property. So anytime you buy or otherwise acquire property, the provincial government, BC government here, assesses a property transfer tax. What that is, it's assessed on the fair market value of the property. It's 1% of the first 200,000 and then 2% on the remainder. So if you have a property that's worth 500,000, okay, 1% of the first 200,000 is $2,000, 2% on the remaining 300 is 6, which leaves you with a property transfer tax of 8,000. Okay. Now, for most buyers, especially first-time home buyers, there is an exemption for first-time home buyers. The qualifications for that is that the property has to be under $450,000. Okay, there's a full exemption under 425. Between 425 and 450, there's a prorated exemption. In order to qualify for this exemption, you have to be a first-time home buyer. That means you've never owned a property anywhere in the world. So that means if you've owned a hut in the middle of South America somewhere that's registered in your name, you're not qualified for the exemption. Okay, so you can't have owned a principal residence anywhere in the world. On the other hand, you could have owned 50 investment buildings everywhere, and you're still okay, as long as it's not your own principal residence. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is you have to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. If at the time of purchasing or acquiring the property you're not a citizen or a permanent resident, you do have up to 1 year after the completion date to become a citizen or permanent resident, and then a year and a half to apply for a refund of the property transfer tax. So can't have owned property anywhere in the world, have to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, has to be under 425 for a full exemption, or between 425 to 450 for a prorated exemption. So another factor when purchasing property is when two people are buying property and one is a first-time home buyer and the other isn't, there's a way to lower the property transfer tax, and that's to own the property as tenants in common. There's two ways of owning property. One is to own the property as joint tenants. The other is to own it as tenants in common. Now, most of the time, people who are buying property, especially as spouses, partners, will own the property as joint tenants. Joint tenancy means that you'll own the property equally. So if two people are buying, it'll be 50-50. And the advantage of that is that if one person were to pass away, then the survivor takes the deceased share of the property without having it go through probate, which would cost probate fees and things like that. Okay. The other way of owning the property is as tenants in common. Tenants in common allows people to own the property in unequal shares. So in our scenario here, the first-time home buyer would own the property as 99% owners, and the non-first-time home buyer would own the property as with 1%. Okay. That means that, you know, when you're buying a property transfer tax will only be assessed against that 1%. Okay. Here's the thing, though: if one person were to pass away, then that deceased share of the property would have to go through probate, be distributed according to the will. Okay. So this strategy, if you're going to do this, don't die for the first year. And then after the year is over, you can change the ownership to joint tenancy, and that would help save on the property transfer tax.